Hello and welcome to Nerds in the Corner. I'm your host, Bill C.
And I'm your co-host, Justin McNeese.
Well, we've had some exciting times researching some topics over the past couple of weeks there, Justin. What is today's topic?
Yeah, it's been great, Bill, doing some more research and learning some new things. And today we're bringing to the surface a topic that was originally brought about in 2011 and made a lot of waves in the scientific community and the UAP community. And that's the Baltic Sea Anomaly. It's resurfaced in the last several months. And so today we're going to bring some new information and some historical information and kind of walk our audience through what's going on right now.
That sounds great. So from what I understand, in 2011, a Swedish team called Ocean X discovered a round object while scanning the Baltic Sea floor. And at the time, they were joking because it looked like the Millennium Falcon, about those dimensions, and round and flat, disc-like, 60 meters in diameter and about 90 meters deep under the water. Sonar images resembled a disc with odd straight lines, and also what looks like steps and ramps, things that you would see and you would not expect to see on a naturally occurring object, but something that appeared to be engineered. And also interesting was while they were doing these studies using this equipment like radar and sonar and LiDAR, there were lots of these electromagnetic interferences that would cause equipment failure that we've been seeing on some of this with the recent research teams that are reporting on other anomalies.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I think that anytime you see something that could or could not be naturally occurring, especially in the ocean or anywhere throughout the world, and it has this very symmetrical, very round kind of configuration, and it talks about the runway where it looks like a spaceship crashed or some kind of craft into the ocean and then skidded across the ocean floor. I think as human beings, we're wired to try to assign meaning to things. And as I was doing the research, there's a lot of that within the Baltic Sea Anomaly, where you have, I guess, the UAP group trying to assign meaning to what that is, and then the scientific community. So this was a very contested kind of anomaly that was happening during this time frame. So tell us a little bit about why it's resurfacing today.
Well, more and more discussion has been directed towards these type of anomalies that, in 2011, the narrative was not as open or involving of these type things, but it's come to the surface again, like as in people are saying, oh, this was interesting that never went anywhere. And so they're proposing some new expeditions or research topics based on this. And so far, samples are revealing the typical glacial deposit expectations of the area: sandstone, granite, basalt. That's what it appears to look like it's made of, or that its immediate surroundings consist of. But the more they dig into it and the more they refine the imagery, the more that they see these engineered looking artifacts, these recurring horizontal lines or parallel lines or dimensions on it that you wouldn't expect to occur naturally. Now, on one hand, people are suggesting that this is just a big lump of Ice Age geology, and this particular lump just ended up a flat disc with these features on it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, on the whole other end of that spectrum, they say, well, this doesn't fit what you'd expect to see. It's anomalous in its position. And so what do all good scientists do is they want to go look at it again. They want to upgrade their equipment, do more research, and try to get greater clarity of what this might be.
Do you feel like the recent last 2 years of exposure hearings that's going on in the government, do you think that's what's fueling this to pick back up?
I think that's absolutely what it is. Even a podcast like this, Justin, back in 2011, just discussing these things would have opened you up to ridicule, lost your funding, not been hired at your university, totally dismissed. And now it seems like it makes more sense to look into these than to ignore them. Because the more we stop ignoring these anomalies, the more that we're finding legitimate things that are deserving of research. So, for instance, OceanX co-founder Dennis Asberg hints that it could be something so impactful that perhaps it shouldn't be disclosed. And in 2011, when something like that came out, well, it would not have been disclosed. But now, a few years later, you have senators talking about these things in open forum, sworn testimony, and also encouraging other institutions to look into these things, and then also recommending that the government quit suppressing these things and release that information, such that I don't think people are afraid to look at these things and learn more of their nature and what they're made of without, that they're no longer so afraid to, without not being afraid to lose their funding, or not get hired.
Yeah, that makes sense. I got a point and then two questions for you to piggyback off of that. My point is to coincide with what you were saying. I think that the UAP disclosure hearings and the Senate committee hearings are opening the door to several topics similar to this that could have been either or. And I think you have enough individuals around the world that want to find out the truth, that really want to know what was there. So we see the data, we see the information that was collected before, but we kind of want to see a little more, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the folks on the other side that argue, well, we don't really understand the ocean all that well, and we don't really understand everything that's in the ocean all that well. And whether you want to believe it or not, this could very well be a naturally occurring phenomenon.
Yeah, it could very well be.
So that's kind of just my point. My questions are, one, when he's the founder of OceanX says, something so impactful, maybe it shouldn't be disclosed. What do you think he means by that? That's my first question.
So it seemed like a decade ago, if something was discovered, this came up at the Göbekli Tepe site, or even the information or the images that were coming under the pyramids of Giza, under the Khafra pyramid, just because it didn't match with the history lessons that are in books and what professors say, just the fact that it didn't match with that meant that you couldn't talk about it, which seems silly. And even in this scenario, it appears that it's likely made of sandstone and granite and basalt. So it's hard to picture a UAP being made of that. I don't know that UAP is part of this particular conversation, but structures like that in the Baltic Sea Anomaly, or in the Baltic Sea, don't fit into the traditional history that's being explained. And it seems like previously there was just fear of saying anything that was in contrast to the established history narrative, which is not healthy for history. We must always approach history as if we don't know the complete picture. We don't look in the past and know everything. And so we should be studying these things with archaeology and historical documents and other images and techniques to try to fine-tune our understanding of the past, instead of, when you find something that doesn't meld with our current understanding of the past, we're not going to talk about this because we'll get in trouble if we talk about something that doesn't match with the traditional narrative. And sort of what's feeding a lot of this, for instance, scientist Beatrice Villarreal, she's been in the news here lately, and we'll probably have some interesting episodes coming up on some of her research. But she's the one that was taking these plates of telescopic images from the 50s and 60s and noticing that over time, some of the imagery and some of the artifacts found in those plates were moving or were different as time went on. So you would expect, if you took a photographic images, and these are not digital images, these were glass plate photography type things, taken from a telescope. If you look at it, if you take a picture of it, and a few years later you take an image again, all the stars and lights and things should not have moved that much, or if they do, it should be moved in an explainable way. But she's, and this paper has just been released, even as we're talking. It's a major point of discussion, that these things are changing. There's more things in the second plates, and sometimes less things in the subsequent plates taken years apart, and there's no explanation why those things would change. But she also had looked into this, and sort of, there's the rumor mill and there's the reliable rumor mill. Well, she has supposedly authored a white paper that is suggesting that this particular anomaly has geometric stair-like structures. Also, strange magnetic readings are coming from this area, and features technology or cavities inside. Now, these are the types of things that previously you couldn't have said aloud, but I think due to her recent success and the successful peer review process that she has recently undergone, just by showing, look, here's a photographic plate from one time, here's a photographic plate from a few years, these spots have moved and these spots are not there. I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, I think if you have an extraordinary claim, you should have extraordinary evidence, and that
her evidence seems extraordinary.
Fits the definition of that for sure. Another kind of question that I've been noodling around as we were thinking about this and other topics is whether it's the Baltic Sea Anomaly or whether it's this paper that you're talking about. Do you feel like sometimes when we get in these back and forth and these peer review conversations that some of that has to do with us being at the edge of understanding of science? That the questions exist because we just aren't capable of understanding what we're seeing yet. It may not, it could be extraterrestrial, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's scientifically irresponsible to think that we're the only life form in a universe as large as what we're composed of, that we are the only living life form out there. And then you get into the definition of what does life mean to you? Is it microscopic? Is it human being like me and you? And that's a whole different conversation. But do you think that some of this has to do with just some of the folks that's a part of the discussion? We just lack the ability to understand these things right now.
I think some of that, yes. There are lots of things that we don't understand, but there's this big push to not want to understand things, or that are not wanting to understand things that are different than how we understand them. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the significance of something like this, if it's not just a rock that just for some reason developed these shapes and features due to natural glaciation, what that points to, and the reason it's significant, is this is essentially an artificial construction that was part of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization. Mm-hmm. In the past, that was just such a no-no to even talk about. And now more and more things seem to be pointing to, well, that there's obviously was something going on pre-Ice Age, and this is another thing that could possibly, it's 90 meters under the water. It could, again, it could just be a round rock. But to bury your head in the sand and be afraid to even look, I think that has changed. Also, if a pre-Ice Age civilization was able to accomplish these things or be associated with it, that means that there were advanced alloys or machinery, or they're suggesting non-human technology or technology that we don't understand, and that's what you were pointing at. Mm-hmm. That this definitely points to something that we don't understand. But at the same time, you've got to make sure that you're doing it safely. When they were down there measuring it, they did find these strange electromagnetic anomalies. Does that mean that we're going to be disturbing dangerous or destabilizing physics? Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like it's that low likelihood, but what it will be destabilizing of is the narrative from governments, religion, academic sciences, established industry who would want to keep these things secret.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think that we're talking about this today, because this is not the only thing like this that potentially could shake up the cart enough that those groups would have to take a step back, change what they've been saying, and that's so upsetting to them, and they fear the consequences of that they would rather suppress the information.
Yeah, I feel that. I think you make a great point there. It feels like, disclosure or whatever type of information that you're trying to get out there that seems like it's having a lid put over it is more so about controlling the narrative than it is about necessarily that if they care about the information or the impact that it has on or whatever. It's just the groups that you mentioned want to be able to control how, when, and if that information is released to the public, because it challenges the fabric of society. It challenges the way that you and I wake up in the morning and the way that we see the world and the way that we go about our lives, right? If we have information that drastically shifts our mindset, then what does that do to human nature?
That's right.
Right. How does that impact our mental capacity? How does it impact the way that we view things that we've been told for, thousands of years? I think that's where it comes from. Part of where it comes from is that there's a control narrative there. Also, but it's interesting to me because how fascinating would it be if it was something like a society that was lost or a culture that was lost. I mean, the earth is billions of years old, right? I guess it's not outside the realm of possibility that a human species rise to the pinnacle of technological advancement and collapsed, and there was no record of it. And so now we are restarting.
Yeah.
And AI, and maybe we're getting closer back to those points that existed before. Maybe not. Maybe it did come from somewhere else, but
yeah, who knows? But at least it doesn't match the archaeological or the geological or the technological history that we've been told. And it let's say it produces something that's very impactful and shakes that up. Or, let's say me and you, if something like this were to be discovered so that the news is so big that a history department at the university was shut down, or some point of physics was totally changed, what sort of things like this could be so impactful that we look back and say, boy, we should not have looked into this? Is there such a thing that is a Pandora's box whose contents are so mind-blowing, so revealing of physics or history that we didn't know, that it would be better not to look in the box? Is there anything like that? Could you imagine a scenario where information is revealed that changes your life in such a way that you wish?
Yeah, there's a couple of scenarios that I don't think it would be the Baltic Sea Anomaly that would bust the box open for me, but I could see a world where, the world is and we don't talk about politics and religion on this podcast for a reason, but the world is, almost every culture has had their own version of afterlife and some type of religious ties, right? That could absolutely change. That could be so impactful that it would change human nature to its very core.
Yeah.
I think for a significant amount of people, if documents or records or something were discovered that completely took religious context and just erased it.
Yeah, I agree. So
and also any type of if there were technologies or any type of extraterrestrial visitation, or I think that also would be so mentally difficult for most human beings to fathom that we exist. We don't really understand that much of what's out there beyond our solar system, or et cetera. So I think that would be so impactful for people to hear, that it could cause, kind of a mental breakdown in
It could.
society, that they're like, oh no, we actually are not alone. And what does that mean for
Right.
us?
Or that our history has been way different than what we understand. Is it worth knowing? Is something that impactful? Is it something that we shouldn't pursue? So think of it like this. Let's describe knowledge in the terms of a light bulb or a torch or a candle that we can turn up or turn down. And so we as scientists or citizens of our community, we should all be seeking knowledge to improve the way we live. We want to live more productively, more harmoniously,
Right.
with greater peace and empathy towards each other. If learning about these things and looking into them turns up that lamp or light bulb such that we're shedding more light on what we know in the world as we understand it, as you obtain more light, you're eventually going to start seeing things or understanding things that were previously in the shadows. And some of those things might be unsettling, startling, paradigm shifting, aggravating to the history department at whatever university, embarrassing to the government or a religious institution. When we start to get to where we're upsetting that cart, is that reason to quit seeking more light and turn the dimmer back down? Or do we continue to shed more light on the topic and deal with the consequences of understanding?
I think you and I agree that seeking knowledge and turning the light up is definitely the path forward, because the more informed and the more knowledgeable you are, the better reference point you have to think more deeply and strategically and make decisions. You have more avenues to explore in your brain when you're trying to connect dots and you're trying to make things make sense around you. However, I do think that us and the scientific community or anybody that's interested in those things are in the minority of folks. And I think you can look across history and see that there have been these great thinkers and great philosophers and great scientists that have pushed the boundaries, that have gotten us to the point that we are now. They have always been the minority.
Yeah.
In history and in society, and I think sometimes the discoveries of the time was too much for most people to comprehend and understand. And I don't mean that from an intellectual perspective. I mean, you got people that are going to work trying to survive and buy groceries and living paycheck to paycheck. The last thing they want to know is there could be a spaceship hidden in the Baltic Sea, right?
Yeah.
That's just one extra thing that I didn't need to worry about today. So I think there is a sub-core of individuals that really push. And I think that maybe that's how it'll always be.
And well said. And those individuals that in the past were suggesting, hey, there's more to these physics that we don't understand, Tesla or Einstein or anyone really who's any archaeologist, as they were turning up the bulb, turning up the lamp, such that you start to see the cobwebs under the table, things that are there are different than what you expected. They were open to ridicule. It wasn't like, oh, hey, you've illuminated this particular thing. It has been difficult to adjust our paradigms, and it did have those consequences, but thanks for your effort. In the past, it's been more of a, how dare you shed more light on this? How dare you obtain the truth on this, because it made us this lie or incomplete truth that we were dependent upon. It messed with that such that we're having to do things differently. And I think that's what they're afraid of in pursuing this.
Yeah, and it's also how are people going to use this information, right? You think about the Manhattan Project. That was a collective of scientists that pushed forward the atomic bomb, and that significantly changed the world. So sometimes you have these discoveries that it just drastically changes what we're doing in our day-to-day life. And now that's a real thing that we all have a fear of that could happen
Yeah.
because of a scientific advancement. It's an extraordinary scientific advancement, but almost every person that worked on that project was just demonized when it was over, and they had nothing to do with what actually happened or making the call. They just came together and solved a problem, solved a scientific problem. So there's also that component when any type of these conversations come out, is who's going to grab that information and how are they going to use it.
Excellent point. It seems like it's intrinsic to human nature, that desire to satisfy the curiosity, the desire to dig for the real truth, to shed more light on the world and how it works. It's hard to suppress that. You can suppress it. You can oppressively suppress it for a time, but eventually a little beacon of light will erode away those barriers, and eventually the truth is known. Well, Galileo and Copernicus all faced those same issues, but the light of time and acceptance of things unknown eventually evolves, and the truth will come out. And maybe that's where we are today. It's no longer the end of the world if you discuss these things in a scientific scenario.
Yeah, I think people get put in buckets of like believers, non-believers when it comes to some of the topics that we discuss. And I really think that's kind of an interesting way to categorize people. It's to me, it's just having some scientific curiosity.
Yeah.
I think asking questions is also intrinsic to our nature. We always have wanted to know why things are happening since the beginning of mankind. And I think that we will continue to ask why things are happening. But I challenge our audience, and I challenge myself every day just to have curiosity in general, but to have scientific curiosity, strip away the noise and look at the data, look at the verified information there, and then also challenge the data. What was being used here? Why did they use that instrument versus this instrument? Why is this paper being published, but we know there's 5 others that was on a specific topic and no one's been able to see that information? It's also very possible that a lot of these things that we run into, they're government projects and technologies that we just don't know about.
So we may yet be actually put in a bucket for looking at these things. Let's hope not. But I think just like us, the listeners of Nerds in the Corner podcast are the curious type.
Right.
I mean, you got to be. That's why you would listen to a show called Nerds in the Corner. And so I'm excited to see what the future reveals on this, and like all of these other topics that we bring up, as time goes on and more light is shed upon these things, we may have to have a follow-up episode, an end of the year or an end of the decade recap on what research did show. Was it just, well, turns out, folks, it was just a round block of granite that was carved by a glacier, or, well, it's got some interesting features to it and more to this picture. But
yeah, I'm super interested to see. I think when they had the secondary team go out, they kind of were looking at it being like a basalt formation, and that was, I guess, the generally accepted description of it naturally occurring at the time. So I'm glad that exposures are bringing topics like this back to the surface, because if anything, it's interesting scientifically. It doesn't have to be not of this world, or if we just find out that it had something to do with an ancient society or an ancient culture, that's just as interesting to me as also if it's just a rock that forms, because then it shows that we have such limited knowledge and information of the ocean and how things can actually occur underneath the water. I think that's incredibly interesting as well.
Yeah. And of course, we hope our audience finds it interesting. And if how would you suggest if some curious listener of this podcast or episode discovers an interesting thought or fact, post it on those comments?
Yeah, definitely. We are very interactive with our comments. So if you come across something that compounds the argument or the information that we've shared today, or something that's in contrast with what we've talked about today, feel free to drop it in the comments, and we'd be happy to review it and chat with you.
We welcome all constructive feedback.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Nerds in the Corner. And if so, join us next time.
Where science and laughter collide on Nerds in the Corner.